So my name is Dania Jones. I am a principal technical specialist for Synapse specifically. So what I do is I work with customers and engineering and kind of cross those two boundaries so that customers can get all the information from things that are coming in our product as well as being able to influence it. And I have been with Microsoft since 2011. And I'm not going to say how many years I've been a data engineer because that just makes me way too old. So I came from a long SQL and Oracle background prior to Microsoft and have been watching the cloud journey, as I'm sure Ren did, coming since you joined in 2012. Azure was very, very much in its infancy of that state. So what we're going to talk through today is Azure Synapse Analytics. And it's kind of really top of mind right now because our public preview was announced at Build today. So hopefully everybody already went out and downloaded it.
Snaps for Build.
That's more than snaps. So it was like a big sigh of relief. So yeah, public preview got announced at Build. And it's really great because now everybody can kind of get in there and get used to working with it. And we'll go through exactly what that means. And we're going to look at it primarily from a data engineer type perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and present my desktop. I'm getting used to the new layout for Teams when you go to the preview and everything's at the top instead of the bottom, but it is helpful.
Everything changes from day to day. So it's got to keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys should see my desktop. Let me know when you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and do the presentation. Now, we are going to do a little bit of slides, but it's just to kind of set the framework. Only like 6 or 7 slides, so not very many. So Azure Synapse Analytics, it's a limitless analytics service that brings together both your data warehousing as well as big data analytics. A lot of people thought when we made the announcement that it was just a renaming of the data warehouse, but it really was because we were expanding what the data warehouse was meant to do. And being able to bring everything together so you have either serverless or provisioned resources, and you guys can make the most use out of your data because we all know that data is great, but you have to get insights out of it, otherwise it doesn't do you any good. And so with that, we kind of brought in both the data warehouse as well as being able to have the business intelligence and machine learning that's needed to get a full end-to-end analytics pipeline. So everybody should be very familiar with this. This was our original modern data warehouse. And this is the architectural design of what you do when you do a modern data warehouse. And it was bringing in on-premise, cloud, and SaaS-based data and ingesting it into a cloud-based platform. With Microsoft, generally speaking, people used Azure Data Factory. And then prepared that data, landed it onto the data lake, and then prepared it with Data Factory and a combination of that with Databricks, Azure Databricks, then transforming and enriching it, and finally serving it out to those end users for visualizations through Power BI. Now, we got feedback from customers that every single UI was a little different. We had to stitch all these things together, and it made it a little bit more complex than it needed to be. So Synapse Analytics really kind of takes over that whole end-to-end pipeline and lets you guys build it out with a single unified interface that will increase productivity because you don't have to hop from thing to thing. And we'll get through that, go through that in a demo and so forth so you guys can see. Now, one thing to note, there's a couple different ways that you can do things within cloud-based services like Azure. One is an infrastructure as a service, which is I just get a machine and I put all my stuff on my machine and I take care of that and I have to patch it and I have to worry about keeping it up. With Azure Synapse Analytics, this is a platform as a service based off solution. So what that means is you don't have to worry about patching the servers. You just worry about consuming information from it and getting that information into it. But you don't have to worry about backups. You don't have to worry about having to set up geo redundancy and all those types of things that we used to have to worry about when we deployed things to servers. I can't tell you how many monthly Thursdays I spent patching servers as a DBA. So now the other thing that it gives you is the power of the Azure ecosystem, right? So Synapse Analytics actually can tie into our Azure machine learning and into Power BI for consumption. So you get your predictions, your machine learning, and then you get your consumption from, being able to build out reports and dashboards. And then that broader ecosystem, you can actually link services in Azure Synapse. You can link in different data services that you're using. You can link in Azure Data Lake Storage. You can link in a Cosmos DB if you have some IoT data that you're landing out there. You can even do streaming with Stream Analytics directly into Azure Synapse. It gives you a really great way to be able to scale independently, where your compute and your storage scale independently of each other, and you can even pause your compute and just only have your storage there. So a couple areas, Microsoft likes to have certain pillars, and that's what we focus on, right? So with Synapse, what we focused on first was performance. This is a massive parallel processing data warehouse platform, and it needs to perform and also give our customers the best price performance. So we've been able to do that and have it be about 94% less expensive than competitors. And we did that through underlying architecture like FPGA processors, which let us control the silicon and how it executes a query. And also bringing in things into the separation of compute and storage lets us have like remote storage for result set caching and materialized views that really enhance that performance. And so you're not thinking about queries running for hours, they're running in minutes. And then industry leading security. So as a trusted cloud computing platform, we always make sure that we have security, as you saw with Ren's demonstration. It needs to be forefront, right?
Timing.
Security is extremely important. So we are highly focused on security for Synapse Analytics, from things like being able to control what rows people can see within a table, down to being able to have dynamic data masking, where you can say that I only want someone, if there's a social security number, everybody should only be able to see the last 4 digits, right? And being able to classify data. We actually have free tools that come with Azure Synapse Analytics that you can point at your data source, and it will tell you if you have potentially compliant data in your data warehouse, like if it's GDPR or PII. And you can build your own rules too and say, hey, if something comes in like this, it's considered highly important to our organization. I want to classify it so people can only see it a certain way.
That's amazing. That's just out of the box?
Out of the box, yes. Regardless of what size data warehouse you choose in Synapse, you get all of these features.
So is that only in Synapse?
The data classification is actually on SQL Server as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then workload aware query execution. So this is being able to manage your workloads. And I always call this the noisy neighbor syndrome, because I did large database servers and I'd have multiple applications using the same database server at the same time. You have the same thing in the cloud. You've got multiple teams using your data warehouse, and you want to prevent them from stomping on each other, because the person with the worst query is always the one who comes in at 5 a.m. and starts their query, right? And then everybody else comes in and all of a sudden the system's slow and the DBA or the data engineer gets called, right? Because it's slow. It's their fault. So with Synapse, you could actually have it be workload aware, where you can set up priorities and isolation so that the users aren't impacting each other negatively. And it will actually scale dynamically as it's doing it. So you can set it up where like a specific user is in the sales team, and they come in and they get to use 100% of the resources within Synapse. And then the marketing team comes in later in the day and they start executing their queries. You can actually set it where the sales team's resource would get scaled back so the marketing team could have some room. So it's really, really important to be able to have that kind of granular control over things. And then data flexibility. So being able to ingest from a variety of data sources, because we all know we can't just pick one. Everybody has at least like 5 or 6 different, if not 10 different types of data sources that they need to connect against. With Synapse, you've got 90 plus different connections that you can actually connect sources you can connect to. And then productivity. We were told time and time again, productivity, it's too many things. Too many things are different. I need it to be easier. So we really focused on those primary things. So I'm sure some of you have seen this. In fact, I saw somebody that I work with before as a customer that's on this call. So I know he's seen it. So what is Azure Synapse Analytics? What we did was, and it's really similar to what Ren was showing with Azure Sentinel. You noticed if you looked really closely at the top, he had a workspace. So what we have is we have a logical workspace for Synapse Analytics that is a place where you kind of connect in all your sources. You can do all your working with your data. And in that platform, it gives you integration back to our data lake storage. It also gives you a choice of runtimes based off of what you're trying to do. Now, being my long background with relational databases, I tend towards the analytics runtime here, the SQL Analytics runtime. That is the massive parallel processing runtime for SQL Server, which is a provisioned data warehouse currently. And then you also now have the option of using a Spark-based runtime if you want also. So you can actually execute Spark within the same platform that you have your massive parallel processing data warehouse. That gets you the capability of not always having to use your MPP engine to run every single workload. There might be things that you need to do with machine learning across the data lake and multiple data warehouses, where Spark might be something that helps you do that. It also gives you multiple language support, which we'll get to in just a moment. Now, with this, you actually get two different form factors to choose from. So the provision data warehouse, which is everybody is used to as Azure SQL Data Warehouse, right? It's now Synapse Data Warehouse. That you say, I have a workload, I need this much compute and memory to be able to run it, and I know that's what I need, right? But what about all those little things where people just want to explore data, they're trying to figure out if they have an application or not? For those, we have what is called the on-demand form factor. Now, this is a serverless compute against the data lake. So all those data, all that unstructured data that you have in the data lake, you can actually do a per query execution against the data lake, and you don't have to have anything provisioned, right? It just is included with Synapse, and you can query against the data lake, and I'll show you guys that as well. The next thing we have are the different languages. T-SQL is one that I'm very, very comfortable with, as well as Python. So you get to choose, do I want to use T-SQL and join my data lake and my data warehouse together? Do I want to use Python and start doing data frames and notebooks and so forth, and sharing with other people in my organization, .NET, Java, Scala, and then in the future, there will be R support in there as well. And all this is in a single unified studio. So I don't have to go do, okay, I'm going to do my pipelines in Data Factory, and now I'm going to move over to, using Synapse Data Warehouse for all the database, relational database work I need to do. And then I'm going to use Spark separately for all this combining of different data sources together. This is all in one studio.
I'll give you the snaps for that, because I think that's amazing.
Productivity is a big reason that this all came up. And then on that platform, you also have management, right? You have to have the right resources, give people the permissions that they need, not too much, not too little. We'll make it easy for everybody to get to the information that they need. Security, full monitoring, and then Metastore capabilities within there as well. And with that, we're actually going to go into the demo. So let me escape out of that and go into my browser. Okay, this is the Synapse Analytics workspace. Now, they're pretty straightforward to provision, as you saw from that slide that we kind of just flashed on. When I'm in the Azure portal, I would just go in and provision a new Synapse workspace and then start adding data into it. Now, when you provision the Synapse workspace, you're going to get all these various hubs every time, right? This is how it comes. You get the home, which is this overview hub, which lets me look at, just starting with working with the service, ingesting data, exploring data. analyzing it, and then visualizing it. And then there's different hubs underneath there. One that is all the different data sources that I have, from my Synapse Workspace data sources to my linked data sources. Being able to do development against that, writing scripts either in SQL, my notebooks, developing pipelines, and then orchestrating that, moving that through the different portions of my solution, and then monitoring and managing. So we're just going to walk through a few of these real quick. And Greg, you're just keeping an eye on questions. If you guys have questions,
yes, I am.
Feel free to interrupt, type them in the window, scream out, wait, Feel
free to give snaps as well.
Snaps. So what you would normally do is you come in and you would first want to bring data in from your data sources, right? Whether they're on-prem or cloud, you would just be able to copy data directly in. Now, what I'm just going to show you guys real quick is these are some of the data sources that I already have connected in here. But if I want to, I can go ahead and create a new connection. And you can look, there's just a wide range of things for me to connect to. So, I can connect.
Snaps.
So, and I can just search, like a lot of times there's a long list. So I can just type SQL and I can pick which type of SQL I want to connect to. I can type in Data Lake and I can pick whether I need to connect to Data Lake Gen 1 or Gen 2. Just for you guys, just a little information on the exploring of the data lake. It is just with Gen 2 right now, but you can bring data over from Gen 1 into your solution, and that it helps you with that whole management of your data sources. So you can just pick Gen 2, and then you just go ahead and point that to the storage within your Azure subscription. Now, what I'm going to do is show you guys some of the ones that I have already connected in here. So as I bring my data in, then I have the opportunity to take that and build databases off of it. But what I want to show you first is the linked services in here. So under my storage accounts, this is my Data Lake Gen 2 workspace, right? I've added this into my environment, into my Synapse workspace. And I can just go here and I can just quickly examine the data. This is the Twitter feeds that are coming in. These are brought in as Parquet files. And then I can quickly just bring them into my database and start looking at them. Now, I don't even have, for this particular, if I just am trying to figure out, is this something I really need to use? I can actually just right click, select top 100 rows. I'm going to go ahead and use my on-demand engine. Remember, this is the serverless compute against my data lake. I'm looking at my data lake, so I'm just going to use the on-demand and say, just go ahead and show me this file. It's going to give me the top 100 rows from the file. And I can quickly examine this. I can see, okay, I might need to cleanse it with some of the city data, but maybe I want to look for, retweets or something like that. And rather than writing a long query to kind of go look at that, I can just go to the chart view of this and I can quickly see here, okay, so this is where my retweet count was 49. Maybe I want to go look at that record a little bit more closely, right? See what their sentiment was, things like that. So that lets you quickly look at the data just that's in the data lake. I don't have to move it. I don't have to do anything to it. I can just quickly query it. Now, when it comes to moving data around, I'm going to go ahead and close that one out. That's where you kind of go into the development area. So I can go in here and I've got SQL scripts, notebooks. I have my visualization. Everything that I needed to do to manipulate data is in the develop hub. Okay, so with my SQL scripts, I can go in here and I can run a query against my data warehouse. This will show, looking at how many records are in the data warehouse currently. So we've got 30 billion records in here, and I can quickly just go ahead and start querying against that data, start pulling information out of it. And I've got things in here available to me like being able to do the dynamic masking, all the column level security, etc. And as I develop scripts, it just automatically adds them to the develop hub. So let me show you guys that real quick. So if I go into here and I say, you know what, let's go ahead and go back in here and let me look at my, let's look at our sales data here. Actually, let's go back to this one real quick. I'll just do this quick SQL script so you guys can see this, because this is a Parquet file. So Parquet files are a little more formatted than other files are. So if you look here at the SQL script 4, it is now automatically in my develop hub here. I didn't have to do anything else. And when I'm done with it, I can publish it out through my CI/CD support within Synapse so that it can go through the approval process to get added as a solution. Now, back to the data, I wanted to show you guys this one as well. A lot of people are still using CSV. I think that's because Excel is still the tool of choice of most people.
Unfortunately.
I know.
Unfortunately.
So many businesses are still run off of Excel.
Absolutely.
So you know you're going to get a CSV as one of your data sources. So with this tool, I can actually just click and I can do a preview, and it's going to just show me what's inside that Excel file. So I can quickly go ahead and create this. We also have the ability to do copy commands within here that will automatically bring over the schema without you having to define it. You can just say, create the table, and it will copy it in. So you can import it directly. But I can quickly look through this and see, you know, is it going to have it as the columns of the first row? Do I need to change that on my imports? Things like that. Okay, so now, when you go into starting to develop pipelines and so forth, let's go ahead and walk through a pipeline that's bringing data in from an existing data source, right? So we can go ahead and go, this one is bringing it in from SAP HANA into data lake storage, right? And that is so I can take my on-prem SAP data, bring it in, have it in the data lake, and then people can start doing development against that. So we'll just look at this real quick. If this looks familiar, if anybody has used Azure Data Factory before, this is Azure Data Factory code base within Synapse Analytics. So all one workspace where you guys can kind of do the end-to-end for your analytics. So with here, I've got my copy data selected. And you can look here down below, and is everybody able to see okay? I can zoom in if you need me to, because I know that sometimes resolutions get a little difficult.
It's pretty clear.
Okay.
Unless anybody else is seeing it. I see Joe put his hand up. I think, Joe, that means you're seeing it okay?
We have to define what hand up means.
All right. I see Morris is on. You can see Morris. Hand up means they love it.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, good. All right. So within here, you've got the general things, which is just naming, timeouts, things like that. Now on my source here, this is where it's taking it from my SAP cubes. And then I can also have a sync where this is the destination. So we're just writing it from the SAP into the data lake. So it's just landing into a data set file. You have various mappings you can control, user property settings. Now, if I look at the mapping data flow, so within, let me explain this real quick. Within Azure Data Factory, which is now Synapse pipelines, you have the ability to just copy data. That's very straightforward. I'm taking it from point A to point B, and you might have a couple small things that you need to do as far as, you know, I need to make sure my data types are the same, things like that, right? Mapping data flows let you actually manipulate the data much more than you would in a standard copy exercise. Now, what we call it is code-free integration. The reason we call it that is because you don't actually have to know a coding language to do a mapping data flow. So with here, you've got SAP HANA, and then I'm mapping it in to my data into Azure Synapse from here. So it's going from SAP HANA to the data lake, right? And then we're bringing it into Azure for Synapse for the MPP data warehouse engine. So usually when you bring something into an MPP, you're going to want to do some cleansing to it, right? We want to modify that data, add some additional components to it, remove things from it that aren't necessary. We're still leaving the raw form on our data lake, but for the MPP, it doesn't need to have all of that information, or it needs it in a different way. So if you look here, just on the component of a mapping data flow, you have your various settings, which you can determine where it's coming from. You can determine whether which Azure integration runtime you're going to be using to execute it, the type of compute that you're going to be using, the amount of cores. If it's a really large import that you're doing, a really large mapping, you might choose more cores to be able to drive this. And then whether you're going to use Polybase, which Polybase is our functionality that lets you, it will create an external table that looks at that data and brings it over, and have a staging environment for it. And that just like protects the data as it goes through the process. So if I double click on this though, it's actually taking me into the pipeline that I have defined in the development hub. I didn't have to go to develop and find it. I just double clicked on it and opened up the detail for me. And I can show you guys where this exists in the develop hub as well. So what I'm doing here, as I mentioned, it's code-free integration. So what you have initially is you have, okay, this is my data, right? This is the data that I brought in from SAP HANA. I have it existing on my data lake. I can even put in wildcard paths if I want to in here, and look at what the data is going to look like for when I'm bringing in the schema. And then once you've done that, you can click to do the next step. Now in this one, what we're doing is we're filtering data for the last 5 years. But you could do things like do a split on it. You can add other filters. You can pivot, unpivot the data. So let's go ahead and look at what we're doing here. So we're taking all of the data for the last 5 years. And then we're just using the current partitioning that's available. You can actually change how you partition out the data. You can set it up where you can control how it's landing within the data warehouse so that you can have the most optimal performance. Generally speaking, round robin works for pretty much everything. That is just letting the data warehouse just kind of randomly distribute the data. As you get to larger and larger data sets, you might find that you need to control how it distributes it so that it performs the fastest. And then here you've got being able to do a derived column. So we're taking a column and building our own column based off of the data that's in the underlying data source and bringing that over into the data warehouse. So we're building out a couple derived columns. Then we finally do a select of all of the columns that we want to include into the data warehouse. And finally, our destination is to load it into Azure Synapse. So within the destination, I can have it whether I'm allowing it to do an insert, updates, deletes, things like that are all controllable. And this is all just via a UI. I don't have to write a bunch of, okay, if objects exist, then drop this object and create that. Or if it need to, I need to do inserts versus updates. You can just do it here in a code-free manner. And then I've got the ability to optimize again here. So you have lots of control in here, and this is all just in a step that's cleansing your data into your data warehouse. Any questions on any of that? Does that make sense to everybody?
Everybody wants to drop questions into the chat or go on mute. Now, I love the visual aspect of the orchestration and the fact that you can pretty much do all your cleansing in one place.
Yeah, and so this is just kind of showing you guys when I go into my develop hub, this is where all my data flows are. And that was what we were looking at, was a mapping data flow. So all your mapping data flows will be right here.
Mm-hmm.
Which will let me bring my
This data flow is different than Power BI's data flows, right?
Yeah,
separate things.
We have a very similar name. It's mapping data flow, and then I think Power BI actually renamed theirs.
Oh, really?
I think one of them is getting renamed. Because it's data
Not
flow.
You guys.
Data flow and data flows is like, it's too confusing.
It's too close.
Yeah, just a little too close. And then we'll get into the Power BI in just a moment. So that was around the orchestration. Now, this is all great, but then how do I, make this process happen, right? That's the next question. So if I go back to my pipeline, let me go ahead and close both these out for you guys. Not going to keep it in changes because I probably broke something. Okay, so if I wanted to get this to execute, I have a couple different ways I can do it. I can just go ahead and say trigger now. Trigger now means, okay, I think I'm good. Go ahead and run it. Now, if you do a trigger on your pipeline, just be aware it's going to want it to be published. It's going to take whatever the current published version is. So if you have made changes to it that you want to get included, make sure to publish it before you trigger it. Okay, because it's only going to use the most recently published version. So you have trigger now, and then you have the ability to create additional triggers. So what triggers are is this is your scheduling, right? This is how you schedule things to happen. So we can go ahead and go from here, select a new trigger, and there's a couple different options that you have. You can see here, I can just do schedule. I just want it to occur every 15 minutes, starting on this date, ending on that date, right? I can do it that way. I can do a tumbling window where it's just every 15 minutes for a specific period of time, and be able to have more controls over that, add additional dependencies. Or this one I really like because I've had to write things to do this for years, event-based. So I can tell it to watch a container in Azure. So let me go ahead and pick my subscription here. I'll pick one of my storage accounts. Let's go with, I'm going to pick one that I think exists. And then I pick my container. So I can pick any container that I want. And then I can do a blob path from there in addition, because you might have varying levels within your containers, right? So you can keep going. You can do wildcards. But here I can say, right down here, just this section right here, I can say it when a blob is created or deleted. So blob create means if somebody puts a file in my data lake, it's going to run this job, right? And I have written so many things over the years to try to go look and watch for files and things that it's really nice that just, it doesn't have to be continuously running. I can just say whenever a file lands there, it will go execute this and then it will be done.
It's really nice. Almost like an SFTP site type functionality.
Exactly. Yes, it really is helpful. So, and that's for everything that you're scheduling with those pipelines. You can do any of those, can be event-based, and you can build them out that way. Now, yeah, it's very helpful. And as you'll notice too, if anybody has experience with working with Data Factory, what you'll notice with the Synapse version of it, which is the same code base, you'll notice that Synapse is at the top. So you're going to be bringing over your Synapse sources in here to be able to do manipulation on them, do your transformations, or your machine learning, all those types of things. Now, the other option for those people that really like working in a notebook, like with data frames and so forth, that you guys have, is if we go back to this Twitter data, I can actually right click. And if you notice when we did this, I had the select top 100 rows. I also can create an external table. And the reason I would do that versus use the server the on-demand server function is I may want to be able to use this over and over and over again, right? This particular data source, this external portion of my Twitter data. I might just want people to be able to join to it or write a Power BI report against it and not have to always have them know the syntax. So I can just create an external table. It creates a Hive-based table that then just people can call that table. They can join it to other tables in my data warehouse, and they can do their analysis that way. The other thing that you have in here is being able to add it to a notebook. So I can just right click, say create it, add it to a notebook. It spins up a notebook for me and it starts my Python Spark code for me to just be able to run that data. And I'll show you guys what the Spark components look like. A lot of people ask when it comes to looking at Spark, is this Databricks or is it something different? It is not Databricks. Databricks is a managed version of Spark. Synapse Analytics is using the native Apache Spark. So anything that Databricks has contributed back to the Spark community will be in the Synapse version of Spark. But Databricks does have additional things that it does on top of the native Apache Spark. So if you're looking at choosing between the two, if you're native Apache Spark, you can easily integrate that quickly with Synapse. if you're going down the Databricks path and you chose it for specific reasons like the Databricks Delta Lake or the shared notebook experience, continue using Databricks. It does connect into this, and it is still a first-party Microsoft tool. You can actually just import those notebooks into this interface. So the other thing that we had available within here is to look at it as a bulk import. So, and that you can even do, let's actually look at that one on a whole folder of data, because how often do we actually work with individual files, right? So if I go to I think my campaign data has folders in it. Nope, of course it doesn't. It was in one of these, sales data. SAP HANA does. So within my SAP HANA data, I've got different folders within here. So I can click here, do new SQL script, and say bulk load. What this is going to do is it's going to take the data from my storage account. I give it the folder that it's looking for, and then I can tell it all the formats that are within this folder based off of what it's, compression, row delimiters, all those types of things that you get used to doing when you're working with lots of different data sources. And it will, then I tell it that I want to do it against my Synapse pool. I'm going to go ahead, my test table, because I think there's already my test is in there. And then I open the script. And what that's going to do, it actually creates all the code for me using what we call our new copy command. And the copy command is faster than our previous poly-based commands, but it also lets you just have it with a very simple copy into. So all this does is it's saying, okay, if it doesn't exist, go ahead and create my table. And it's looking at the files that are within this folder as far as how many columns they have. And then I just have this copy command that copies it directly in. So that's how it makes things very easy to bring into the data warehouse and work with. Now, okay, so we went through kind of bringing data in. In your workspace, you'll have your MPP data warehouse with all your tables that you're used to having, any external resources, store procedures, all those types of things that you're able to do, partitioning your data out. That can all be done in the MPP. And then under linked, this is where you have your storage accounts, Cosmos DB databases can be loaded in here as well. And then you'll also have in here the different data sets. These are what are being used within those data flows. So these are different data sets that I've registered with my system. Now, before I get into visualization, there's a couple other things that engineers and people managing the system would need to know, which is around being able to manage and monitor. So let's look at the management portion first. So managing is being able to determine how many SQL pools you've got. You can see we have a few in here. Some are paused, some are online. The on-demand is one that is just enabled by default. It's auto-sized and it's always online because it's just waiting for somebody to send the query, and you only pay for the queries that are executed against the on-demand. The Synapse Data Warehouse here, I can actually click on this, see the size of it, the different properties, my configuration, the workspace that it's part of for any connection information that I need. But I can also scale it directly from here. So if I click on the scaling, it lets me scale the performance level directly within the Synapse workspace. So I don't actually have to leave and go out to the Azure portal to do it. I could do it from the Azure portal as well, but this just lets me stay within my Synapse Studio. And then here are my Apache Spark pools. So like I mentioned, Spark will be one of those components that you have in here. You can actually add servers to run those distributed Spark pools, and you can choose the size. You can see we have some small ones here and some medium ones that are available for us to use. And then you also have the capability of choosing larger ones too. So the large is a 16 CPU machine for your Spark pool. And then you can control like the libraries and so forth that are part of that Spark pool. And then my external connections. So as I connect sources and destinations to this service, those are added in my link services. So you can see I've got all of my different data lake storage in here. I've got Key Vault, I've got Synapse, I even have an Oracle system in here. And if I had not added Power BI yet, it would say, hey, Power BI hasn't been added. Do you want to add it? It will actually give you an alert at the top to add Power BI because it is a key part of the full analytics story. You can connect additional reporting tools to this. You could connect Tableau or Click, but they're not going to be brought into the studio. Okay, and then in here, I also have the ability to look at my triggers, my integration runtimes, which are what I use to be able to execute those pipelines against the different data sources throughout either my Azure systems or even into my on-prem systems. And then I've got the ability to control the access of this environment. How many people are going to be workspace admins, which can do anything within the workspace, versus people that just focus on Spark or people that just focus on the MPP and on-demand SQL. Within monitoring, this is where I can actually look at my pipeline runs. So I can look at some of these pipelines. I can actually go in and examine it more. Like this is a copy task. I can go in and if I click on those little glasses there, it will actually show me what happened as far as it bringing the data over, what the source was, what the destination was, if they succeeded or not. It has all that information in for me. I can look at it as a list or a Gantt chart. I can also look at, let me go back to my pipeline runs. I can look at how many over the past 30 days, or this is a demo environment, so it's not super busy, but a lot of times you'll just be looking current day, a custom range, the last 7 days. All of these also can interact directly with the log analytics that Rin was talking about earlier. So you can actually have all of the logging go out to that and be able to use that as well on top of the monitoring this directly within here. Trigger runs.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I had a question ready for you for that.
Oh, there you go. What's your question, Rin?
So that's awesome. No. Whether there was integration between the monitoring and diagnostics of this and piping that into log analytics for additional monitoring. So that's great.
Yeah, and there's even a step further on it for the massive parallel processing data warehouse component. Mm-hmm. All the auditing from that can actually go to the log analytics workspace.
Oh, that's fantastic.
If you turn on query store and auditing for the data warehouse, the query store can actually write all of the query plans that it's using to the workspace so that you can keep it for longer, right? Because it only goes up to, I think it goes to 10 gigs currently in a certain period of time. But that way you can keep it for like a year, right? And just pay additional storage, as well as all the audit information from this can go directly.
Interesting from an auditing perspective, the type of data that's being accessed and copied over based on the tasks that you have orchestrated, right, and built into this. It'd be interesting from that perspective, as well as how you're also integrating with other tools like the Apache Spark portion of it, right, and what data frames you're building out, right, and how you're leveraging the tools within a given workload. And that kind of gets exciting to see what those possibilities are from a monitoring and a security perspective, as I'm kind of wearing that hat, so to speak. So this is very cool.
Yeah, and you'll see there's various the PySpark based notebooks, very Jupyter like. It's actually Azure notebooks that are in here, which are Jupyter based. So you can easily build out your data frames and be able to do analysis on small sets of data and then publish those out. And what's really cool about this, as you build out machine learning models with Synapse, you can actually bring those into the data warehouse and have the data warehouse run them as a SQL predict, which is just a query to be able to, so you could write a select statement that sends over the information to the machine learning model and brings it back out to you as the results of the query.
Could you integrate the Apache Spark and the machine learning models here to let's say security data living inside of a log analytics workspace?
Oh, that I haven't tried yet. That would be interesting.
Ah,
That would be interesting to look
giving you
at.
some homework and food for thought.
Yeah, I had a customer at one point that wanted to look at the audit failures on SQL and use log analytics to automatically lock people out of databases, which was a little bit on the extreme of the SQL police, but you know, it was sensitive data. So, yeah. So the other thing to look at, and I want to be cognizant of time, so is how we actually look at all this data, right? We've got it all coming in, we're building our flows, that's great. How do people interact with it, right? You've got all the various tools that people are used to using. They can still use Management Studio to pull data out of the data warehouse. They can use this interface for the people that you want to, but I also have the capability of looking at Power BI. So within, I have my Power BI connected in, right? These are all my data sets within my Power BI workspace. And Ryan Harmon knows this very well. I'm going to call you out, Ryan, because you and I actually played with this together at one point. You have your existing existing data sets. You can actually add a new data set as well. Now, what it's going to do is it actually tells you, okay, you got to use desktop, right? So you start at desktop, you build it out, and then you publish it to your workspace. That's how you add a data source to the Power BI. This is not taking the place of the Power BI workspaces. It's just integrating with them. Okay. Now, I could take this and just say, you know what, I'm going to build a new Power BI report, or I can look at my existing Power BI reports. So I can go ahead and click here, and I can look and interact with my existing Power BI report, which is taking a second to load up. And this one is actually looking at some of the data within my customer insights. So I am able, and I can minimize this down a little bit so it's a little easier to read. So if you guys look here, I know zoom it is a wonderful thing. I can actually expand all the resources within here. So this is looking at the tree for my campaigns as part of my customer insights. And let me go ahead and just, you can actually easily, with the decomposition tree, which is a visualization type in Power BI, I can just point to my campaigns and say, okay, now I want to look at all the regions within here. Now let me expand out North America. What do I want to look at? Let's look at the countries within North America. And then within the United States, I'm going to look at, let's look at our customer segments. And we've got boomers and Gen Xers in here. And then I can even look at my sources if I want to and say what sources this is coming from, Bing, Facebook, and others. And those are all part of this visualization that's coming from my data warehouse, right? If I click on the visualization right here, you can see these are the different things that are coming in from the data warehouse. This is the structure, and these are the different fields that I'm using. And I can even do the standard Q&A on this. So I can sit there and say, okay, now that I've got this, this one is nice because they were smart enough to make a visual, which I'll show you guys here real quick, that shows the keywords. So this is like a best practice right here, because a lot of times keywords don't necessarily match with your data sources. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just ask the question of this. Let's look at our profit. And this is, this is actually hitting against the Synapse Data Warehouse. If it's going to let me do this, let me go click here. Okay. Profit by country. And see, it's trying to guess what I'm asking. So it's immediately showing me my profit by country, by product category. And you notice I'm choosing from those keywords on the side. As now, as you can see, as a bar chart, that's kind of hard to read. So let's look at it as a tree map. And I just hit enter, and then I just have my visualization right there. So that's showing you how Q&A can work, and it doesn't have analysis services between it and the data warehouse. It's actually directly hitting it. Now, another one that I wanted to show you guys, which even shows off even more the strength of this with Power BI, is the billion rows one.
Whoa.
Which we're going to go ahead and build this out real quick. I'm going to click on a blank Power BI report here. Okay, so let's make this, get as much screen landscape as we can here. Okay, So with my Power BI report, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to search for a couple things. So let's first start with our customer ID, because I know I've got sales, so I have customer IDs. So I'm going to go ahead and bring over my customer ID. And what I'll do is I'm going to take this, go here, change it to a card because it's easier to see. So this is how many customers how many customer IDs I have in the data warehouse. 30.17 billion that are coming in on this particular. So let's go ahead and title, and we'll say customer count, right? So I can easily just start working within here, and I can go ahead and take my, let's turn off our, where is it? Data label. I'll just leave it for now. Okay, so I've got my customer ID. And then I can take, and you guys can look here, I've got my categories, I've got my products, my sales. So let's go ahead and look. You know, we always want to know how well we're doing with things. So let's take our customer ID again, right? So take our customer ID. I'm going to drop it in a blank portion of the screen so I can build a new visual. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at the profit. Go ahead and add our profit in so we know what our customer and profit is. And then maybe, let's see, let's look at our product's name. So let me go back here. So under products here, I have a product name right here, right? So I can just go ahead and drag that over here as well. And then I'm going to go ahead, as we saw when we were looking at some of this data before, sometimes they're a little harder to read. So I'm going to go ahead and make this, instead of a bar chart, let's make this into a tree map here, tree map. So this is looking at 30.17 billion customers, right? And these are the different products and so forth that they've been, and how much it's been generating, how much profit it's been generating. Then I could even take and go one step further and say, let's look at it by campaign then too. So I'm going to get my campaign info over here. And let's look at our product. Well, we've already got the profit in there. Let's just leave the campaign like that. Just like that, right? So I can actually change this. Let's change it into a slicer. So I can even look at, if I wanted to, I could look at it by specific campaign if I want to look at the profit there. But I can even look for the Be Unique campaign. It was with 10.56 billion. Let me change this to a different visual here. Let's go here. Let's just add the profit over here. So into, whoops, helps if I type it right.
And let me just emphasize,
yes.
You said billion rows.
Billion rows,
billion.
Yes, yes.
Billion
with a B. So here we're going to look at our campaigns with the profit. And it's thinking about it. Let me see if I type something wrong. Campaign and profit. It should be able to do it. Let's click here and see what happens. Yeah, it's not showing it to me now. Of course, it was working before. But so this is looking just at billion rows. Now, one of the ways that it's able to do this very quickly is once I've pulled this count here, it's in that data is now in the cache, the result set cache of the data warehouse. So every time someone else comes in and runs this, it's going against the cache. So you can look, here's another one that's already built out. It's actually executed against the result set cache, so it never has to go back to the data warehouse to pull the records. It's pulling it directly from the cache. So I can easily navigate, because we all know that reports in Power BI pretty much are a report that's written across one data set with multiple visuals, right? So that data set is now in there, and I can easily just bring the data out. So with that, I got about 3 minutes left. So I want to check and see if there's any big questions before we kind of wrap up and look at the final things here.
One question I have is, so when you were looking at the data sets in Power BI, so
Yes.
Are you saying that you can maybe like link between the data sets you have, in this view between, what you're working with off the data warehouse? Can you see, what tables are being, touched by a certain data set?
Yeah, so you do see that over here in this field, but let's go ahead and look at that real quick. So if I go back to my Develop Hub, I closed down too many things, so it makes it a little hard. But here you can see, so this is my CDP Vision data set. And with these, to get down to the nitty gritty of them, you would have to open them in Power BI. In the Power BI interface. I can just go ahead and build something new off of that. But if I wanted to redefine it, I'd have to open in either the Power BI desktop or go look at it directly within my Power BI workspace, which can be done. So the last thing I wanted to show you guys was kind of what this all looks like in your Azure portal, because everybody on here should be pretty familiar with Azure. And so I wanted you guys to see kind of how that is. So this is the standard Azure portal. I do the light version. I know Rin does the dark version, but I tend to like the light version. And so within here, I can actually go to my resource groups, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the Synapse Workspace resource group. And these are all the services that are underlying within my Synapse Workspace. So the workspace makes it much easier than having to go through all these things individually.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that.
So, but you can still do, like, administrators can still, like your Azure admin person can still come in and work with the workspace in the way that makes sense for them, right? Because they work in this portal all the time, so that's what they're used to. So I can go in here. This one's currently paused, but I've got everything available in here, like my encryption, my geo backup policy, my maintenance schedules. Those are all in here for me to look at from a standard Azure administrator perspective. And then this is our workspace. So when you guys leave here tonight, you can go and get the public preview of Synapse workspaces, and it's very simple to set up. And you can even ask Ryan. I'm going to call Ryan out a few times because he actually has one. And then when you're in here, you can actually control everything from firewalls. You can control the SQL pools. But when you want to go into that studio that we're talking about, you just click over here and say Launch Studio. And then that takes you into your Synapse Analytics workspace. As you build out more of them, you actually get a drop down where you can choose which workspace you want to go into. And with that, I am at time. So I hope this was helpful. I get clicks.
This was amazing, honestly. I'm so excited for where Synapse has gone and where Synapse is going. I mean, this is just the beginning of the public preview. I mean,
yeah,
the cloud is your oyster.
So, any questions? We got a couple minutes left.
Yeah, anybody want to jump off mute?
Stop at 10 till.
No, you're good. Anybody want to jump in, either in chat or off mute? Please go ahead. This is a lot to take in. I also understand. And
I can send you guys the slide deck as well.
Oh, that would be great.
We only touched on the beginning of it. It's got a lot of information in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that there's going to be whatever way you want to consume data is the way that you can in Synapse, because it's pretty much open to everything.
Awesome.
Kind of like how Microsoft is now that we have Satya. So
it's an open world, an open data world.
Well, exactly.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing too many questions. I'm seeing everybody say thanks and give you snaps. So honestly, want to thank you both, Dania and Rin. You guys were just so fantastic. You know, Azure is a big world, and, you know, just you guys walking us through is so helpful as everybody tries to understand what the future of everything looks like. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. And if anybody comes up with questions, feel free to send them either to Greg or Amy or I, and we can help you guys track down what to do next. If not, go start playing with the public preview. I know I'm going to be putting it into my own subscription now, because I got to play with it as a hosted one. Now I want to have my own. You know,
it's like a puppy. Everybody just got to have their own, right? Everybody's just in quarantine, getting Synapse deployed. I mean, what's not to love? Exactly.
That's what you do while everybody else is asleep. So thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it. Greg, I'll hand it back over to you.